Howdy! In this mini lecture we will continue the topic of pests in relation to biocontrol and reflect on the usage of genetically modified organisms. The student learning objectives of this mini lecture are: describe organic agriculture and the benefits of growing crops in this manner, describe how genetically modified organisms, GMOs, are created, and evaluate the public debate over genetically modified organisms. As discussed in Part 1, pesticides have developed immunities to the effects of chemicals used to control them. One alternative to chemical pesticides is to use biological control, or biocontrol, to combat pests. With this method, the pest's natural enemies, predators, or diseases they are susceptible to are used to control the pest population. Very often, biocontrols are used to try to control invasive species, which are species that have been accidentally or intentionally introduced to a new area and which are having a negative effect on the ecosystem, human health, or the local economy. As an example of a biocontrol, there is a type of insect called a weevil that is used to control certain invasive weeds in some areas. Another example is the use of the cactus moth native to Argentina that was used to control the invasive prickly pear that overran the landscape in Australia. Extreme caution must be exercised when using biocontrol because there can be unintended consequences. In Australia, although the cactus moth was effective in controlling the prickly pear, the moth also decimated native cacti species and left the ecosystem devoid of native and invasive species of cacti. It's important to remember you cannot turn off biocontrols. It is always risky to introduce a new species to a new area for use as biocontrol because it is difficult to determine how that species may fare in the new environment. They may peacefully coexist with the other species while controlling the pests they were intended to control. They may die off, or they may turn into an invasive species themselves. Organic agriculture is another way to cultivate crops without pesticides. Additionally, organic agriculture requires less fossil fuel inputs since most pesticides require a great deal of oil, gas, or coal to both manufacture and transport them. Organic agriculture is defined as food grown without the use of synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. Instead, this type of agriculture relies on natural processes or products such as biocontrol and compost. Organic agriculture has many benefits, such as reducing fossil fuel inputs, lower input costs for the farmer, and production of higher value produce. Organic farming is more sustainable than modern industrial agriculture because organic farming reduces chemical pollution associated with farming, and in general, organic farming maintains soil quality better than industrial agriculture. Farmers often choose to adopt organic agriculture because they want to be better stewards to the land and they want to avoid the health risks associated with harmful pesticides. Organic farming is growing in popularity and more consumers are now asking for organic products, despite the fact that organic products tend to be about 10 to 30% more expensive than conventional products. One way to view this additional cost is to see it as a way of investing in sustainable agriculture. If we want to continue to feed our growing population and reduce our ecological footprint, switching to growing more food organically is an obvious choice. Sales of organic food have increased rapidly in the U.S. since 1997. Worldwide, organic sales more than tripled between 2000 and 2010. Additionally, the amount of land devoted to organic crops and agriculture and the number of certified organic produces have increased substantially since the early 1990s. If you're interested in organic farming, I encourage you to visit the Howdy Farm on West Campus of Texas A&M University. You can volunteer or intern at this sustainable farm, or you can purchase produce grown on this farm at the farmer's market in your own city or town. Some argue that while organic agriculture is one path towards sustainable agriculture, agricultural biotechnology, or the use of biotechnology to create products derived from organisms is another. The Green Revolution allowed us to feed a growing population. However, our population is growing beyond the capacity of the innovations of the Green Revolution and is demanding even more agricultural innovations. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, have been developed as one such innovation. A great majority of GMOs are created using recombinant DNA. Recombinant DNA is DNA that combines the DNA from multiple biologically unrelated organisms. The first step to create recombinant DNA is to isolate the gene of interest from an organism. Then this gene is inserted into a plasmid, which is a small circular piece of DNA from a bacterium. The plasmid with the gene of interest is now considered recombinant DNA and is placed inside a bacterium. The bacterium will go through DNA replication naturally, and as it does, it will create millions of copies of the desired gene. The gene is then isolated, extracted, and placed inside the target animal or plant. If successful, the target plant or animal with the new gene will express the gene and now have a desired trait, such as drought resistance or increased nutrient content. There is an ongoing debate regarding the benefits and risks of GMOs. On one hand, it must be acknowledged that GMOs have helped to save millions and feed millions of people. For example, the picture on the top right of this slide shows golden rice. Golden rice was engineered in 2004 and contains up to 23 times more beta-carotene than conventional rice. Why does this matter? Consider which populations in the world get most of their nutrition from rice. By and large, rice is a staple crop for billions of people worldwide living in developing countries. By consuming this strain of rice, people in these countries can get the essential vitamin A they need in their diets, without which they run the risk of a suite of illness and health effects, chief among those being blindness. While golden rice was developed for humanitarian purposes, it has met resistance by some environmentalist groups who oppose the development and distribution of GMOs. Bt crops are other GMOs you should be aware of. These crops have been engineered to include a gene from the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis, Bt, in their DNA. This gene causes effects such as increased yield and natural resistance to pests. The resistance to pests is due to the fact that the Bt gene acts as an internal pesticide, killing certain pests that try to eat the crop. Recent research has revealed that the pests are evolving and becoming resistant to internal pesticide of the Bt crop. A third GMO illustrated here is Roundup Ready corn. Roundup Ready crops are GMOs that have been engineered to be resistant to the herbicide Roundup. If a farmer plants Roundup Ready crops, they can then spray the herbicide Roundup around their crops without harming the crop. The debate about GMOs is still very lively, despite the fact that they have been around for over 15 years. There are some great benefits to GMOs. They have raised food yields while lowering the cost of production, thus enhancing food security, increased crop yield so more food can be grown on less land, thus reducing the need to convert undeveloped land to cropland, and preserving biodiversity and ecosystem services. Saved water resources because drought resistance has been engineered into some crops, thus these crops require less irrigation water. May reduce fossil fuel inputs because some required fewer pesticides and enable no-till farming, both of which reduce fossil fuel use. On the other side of the debate, some are concerned about the human health effects that could arise due to eating GMOs. However, conclusive evidence that GMOs pose a health risk to humans is lacking, and these concerns are largely based off of theoretical arguments and unsystematic mammalian experiments. There's also concern that GMOs will turn into weeds if they interbreed with their wild relatives, or that GMOs like Bt crops will harm non-target organisms. Most scientists believe that genes in GMOs will eventually make their way into wild plants. However, the ecological effect of this is yet unknown. While Bt crops do provide the benefit of requiring fewer insecticides, the Roundup Ready GMO crops have been shown to increase the need for herbicides. Recent research has shown that the weeds targeted by Roundup are developing resistance and thus requiring farmers to spray even more herbicide to combat them. Other problems with GMOs include the price to produce these products. Biotechnology can be very expensive, and farmers may struggle to be able to afford the expensive GMO seeds, which they would have to buy every growing season. Biotechnology companies are usually very large and often driven by profit, so there is not much incentive for them to develop a product that caters to the needs and budget of small-scale farmers. Additionally, farmers have been sued by biotechnology companies for saving GMO seeds from one harvest to another, a practice that dates back to the agricultural revolution. Farmers have also been sued for inadvertently sowing GMO seeds. A case of a farmer buying seed from a grain silo that was a mixture of many different seeds was brought before the Supreme Court. Citing patent law violations, Monsanto sued the farmer because the farmer didn't pay them for the seed, even though he didn't realize he purchased Monsanto's seed from the silo. Ultimately, Monsanto took the case to Supreme Court, and the court ruled in favor of Monsanto. Because advancements and innovations in biotechnology are occurring so fast, the introduction of GMOs to the environment is fairly recent, and the effects of changes to the environment tend to develop over a long period of time, so it's too early to dismiss the environmental concerns relating to GMOs. For this reason, many experts are advocating we practice the precautionary principle when it comes to GMOs, which means we should not undertake a new action until we understand the ramifications of that action. We will discuss the precautionary principle more when we discuss environmental health and toxicology. As you can see, there are many things to consider when evaluating the benefits and impacts of GMOs. This concludes the mini lecture on pests and GMOs. Please review the weekly outline and complete the activities for this week per the schedule set forth in the outline. Thanks and gig 'em!